The top story of the weekend was Hayden Wesneski, and I have so many thoughts on him because there's obviously the slider and the running fastball is elite, and he's working that changeup into lefties. Am I wrong? And I got this question for you, and this is a good topic for us to just kind of start on him. I kind of want to see what his outings are like when he doesn't have the slider, because I think that's almost what dictates how good he can really be. Can he fight through not having the command? Because each time he stepped out there, he's had that pitch. And when he has that pitch, he's unhittable. That's exactly what it is. But there's going to be days where you don't have the feel for that slider. And I want to see what he can do when he doesn't have that. And it's not a negative thing. Maybe it's just his pitch that he feels like he can always control or have somewhat of a decent outing with, because he is just that confident in it that when he misses his spot, it's that dirty. And that's okay. But I want to see the growth I want to see each and every one of these guys meet adversity. And I think we've seen Morel have that. We saw Justin Steele have that and bounce back from it. Keegan Thompson with the injury is going through it right now. I want him to end fast. Don't get me wrong. I want him to throw again, maybe have a couple more starts before the end of the season or get into a ball game. But there's a little part of me too that wants him to have one of those starts where he has to fight through it. And I think we'll learn more about who he is if we can get one start where he doesn't have that pitch. I'm always rooting for him to have it. Don't get me wrong, but I want to learn more about him. And I think that in the short sample size we've had, it's clear he's got stuff. But does he have the makeup to when he isn't his best self to fight through it? And that's something I'm really looking forward to, for his next couple starts and going into the offseason, just to see, how he battles, what his adjustments are, and what he does to just get through 5-6 innings. Talk about it all the time. Good pitchers fight through 5 and 6 when they don't have their best stuff. John Lester was that guy. How many times did John Lester take the ball and you're like, man, he doesn't have it. But then you looked up at the end of the game and he went 7 and he only gave up 2, and the Cubs won a 5-2 ball game. And you were like, man, like John Lester had his C stuff and the Cubs still won a ball game against a really good team. Those are the starts, and those are the things I kind of want to see going into the offseason.
Yeah, and I think Juicy brought up a great point on that too, right? Because with position players, it's a little different, right? Like you go through a slump and you got to battle out of that slump, and it's still a battling process, right? It's still adversity that these guys are enduring. But I think, like you said, right, with pitchers, it's a little different because chances are, more often than not, you're not going to have every single pitch under perfect control. That's just not realistic. And it's the great ones that, like you said, can fight through it, still give you effective pitching, and be a, top of the line starter. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that with Justin Steele. I think especially late in the season, right? Like early in the season when he didn't have the stuff, he got beat up, right? And that's just kind of how it went. When he did have the stuff, he looked great. But then by that later part of the season, I mean, shit, I can tell you right now from his second to last start, I think it was before the injury, when he pitched at Wrigley on that Sunday game against the Brewers and got to sit close enough, probably the best vantage point in the ballpark to truly enjoy and appreciate the pitching process that, Steele went through that day. And like for the first inning, he fought himself. Like it took him 6 pitches to get through the first guy. Granted, he struck him out, but it took him 6 pitches. You could see he was fighting himself a little bit early. And then all of a sudden he settled down and just cruised, right? And even on the pitches he did miss and wasn't feeling it, he would come back and he'd get it done. And you saw a couple of starts just in general later down the stretch there for Steele, where you could tell there was days he did not have it. He was fighting himself all day long, but was so nasty that he was still effective. And I agree. I think that's something we're going to still see with Wesneski, right? Because he's only pitched 3 times for the Cubs, right? Yeah. It's just every time he's pitched, he's gone multiple innings. So it's like, you see a lot of them, but it's at, very variable times. I agree. I hope we do get a chance to see that. And it may not happen this season, right? He might just continue to roll this season and into next year. It's a crazy thing to think, but like he could win a rotation spot coming out of camp next year. I don't see how he can't. Like, I think it's possible. Do I think it's likely? Maybe not. But if he comes out in spring training and keeps looking like this, like, then all of a sudden it becomes a kind of probably looking at each other being like, yeah, we kind of have to put him in the rotation. Like, where the fuck else are we going to put him? You know what I mean? Right. But I agree with you, right? It might be until next season that we see that struggle process, but it will be interesting to see because, like you said, right, his slider is his wipeout pitch, and it is just so filthy. It's so gross, you know. But if he can hone that change up that he's working on, especially in on lefties or away from lefties, you know, and he's able to, you know, because he does have that running fastball. He's got the cutter, and then he's just got your traditional four seamer, you know. But if he can be, you know, that guy where it's like, hey, shit, my slider's good today, but it's not great. You know, I got to really hit my spots with these, you know, because essentially, right, they're all variations of a fastball when you look at it, cutter, you know, cutter, right, change, you know, run fastball. He's like, I can at least get all my fastballs down. If that's what he becomes, like you said, Juice, where it's a C-level out effort in terms of stuff, and he's getting it done in 7 innings of work, like that projects incredibly well then for the future and for his future, you know, not just for the Cubs.
Yeah, I think too, like Ron, you brought up a good point because he needs to develop more pitches than just those two. I think that's the next. Good starters have 2+ pitches. We talk about it all the time. Max Scherzer's and Jacob deGrom's and Walker Buehler's, they have 5. You know, like those are the guys that you put at the top of that. And I want to touch on what you talked about him going out and maybe getting a rotation spot. I think that going into camp, it should be a full-on competition. And I absolutely believe that the Cubs are going to spend some money on the rotation as well. I don't think that we're going to go into this next year and see the same names that are fighting for this. I think a lot of these guys will move on or they'll be demoted into bullpen roles because I know that they're going to have to find a way to fill a lot of that as well because some of the prospects that are maybe plus out of the bullpen are at lower levels in the minor leagues. So they're not going to be ready going into next year. It's going to be interesting to see. And that's guys like I think it was Joey who wrote an article about Keegan Thompson, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe he put up a tweet or something around the lines of, you know, maybe he's a 3+ inning guy, you know, at the end of this, and that's what he goes back to doing. Or maybe, you know, maybe there's another guy that we're talking about that it ends up being that. But here nor there, I think that they're going to go out and spend, and I don't see why a guy like that who maybe takes the next step next season isn't the 5. Like they gave Kyle Hendricks that role in 2015, and look how that paid dividends. You know, like I think that there's going to be a guy like that who's out there that ends up being that stopgap. Maybe it's Hayden Wesneski. So with that said, I look a lot into, you know, the team and what roles are going to be defined. And I think that I think it'd be a disservice if he's not given that huge chance. He should absolutely, because it's cheap, controllable pitching that he's only going to get better with reps. And that's why, like, I want him to meet that roadblock so badly because I think that, like much you said about Steele, it'll make him better. It'll make him understand the moment. Like, I think a lot of the reasons why Justin Steele suffered from that early on when he came up in his Cubs tenure was because he wasn't used to not having his stuff and having to battle so hard. Let's face it, like, there's no league that can simulate what MLB hitting is like. Like, you see it in AAA, you see some guys in AA and single A that are making their ways up. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've watched a lot of high A baseball this year, as you know. There are certain guys who walk up there who they move differently opposed to your normal guy who's going to be an everyday minor leaguer. Like, Pete Crow Armstrong is like the exception to all of this. Like, you watch Pete Crow Armstrong out there in center field, And that guy moves different. That guy walks different. He swings different. The ball sounds different off his bat. He runs the bases different. To kind of loop it all together into like this conversation that we're having, I think that when they get to the MLB, the competition is so difficult that when you see Justin Steele kind of struggling, and like he did, I think it's more of adjustment for them because they're not used to getting in a spot where they have to use all 5 pitches to get out of an inning. So that's why, like, when I look at Hayden, I'm like, man, like, down in the minor leagues, you can lean on that slider, right? You could just throw it, and you get into trouble and you can get out. That's not going to happen in the majors. So, like, I want him so badly to get in that situation where he has to pitch out of something, or he has a bad start and he doesn't have it, just for the growth that I think that it'll open his eyes to, all right, I got a great slider. I got a good fastball. I need 2 more pitches. Otherwise, I've capped myself at a 4th or 5th starter. And that's exactly what this is, because there are just not that many 2-pitch starters out there that throw 2 pitches and end up being Cy Young candidates. That's just not how this works. So that's why, like, going in the offseason, I want him to have great starts. Don't get me wrong. But I want him to meet some adversity because I think it'll open his eyes on what he really needs to work on going into the offseason.